If you happen to live in Lake Jackson, Texas, where the main streets go this way and that way, then your congressman is Ron Paul. And he's a presidential candidate, GOP ticket, and he's on the line with us right now. Congressman Paul, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Are you impressed that I knew about this way and that way?
I was wondering how in the world did he know about that?
Relatives.
It's a weird town for the names of their streets, that's one thing.
It is that. Relatives living in Lake Jackson, Texas.
Wow. Okay.
So I have been there many times. So we finally meet, huh?
That is wonderful that we can.
So
I've heard you speak at some of the conventions. I think it was a libertarian convention a while back, but I guess we didn't really meet at that time.
No, they don't particularly like me anymore, and it's basically because it would be the main issue on which you and I might differ, and that would be in the area of foreign relations, foreign affairs. But you're the member of the committee, and you're the candidate. My opinions don't matter. But I need to ask you right now, right off the bat, because we agree on so much. You want an end to the IRS.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, though, if I might be more libertarian than you. Let me ask you one question.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Since you're a physician, and a flight surgeon, too, by the way, or were, since when an individual needs a doctor, should they be restricted to choosing a provider of medical services who has been licensed by the state, or should that just basically be their choice?
I think it should be their choice. I think freedom of choice. I think we have way too much licensing. Milton Friedman was excellent on this. He didn't believe licensing tend to protect certain groups in competition. You know, why do you have to have licensed plumbers and electricians? It's all to protect some group, and I think medicine is that way too. So I argue the case for freedom of choice in alternative care, and that states should have minimum licensing, and some could argue that we probably don't need any.
Well, I would go just, if you want to be sure about your doctor, look for private accreditation behind his name. Right. Look for those initials. You don't need the government to tell you.
And they cannot commit fraud. They can't say they're an MD if they're not an MD. And if they use any kind of procedures that can be harmful, they have to be totally liable. And there would probably be private sources that would give you information better than the government. The government sometimes protect bad actors.
Yeah, and I'm a lawyer, so I feel the same way about lawyers too. Let the people go for a private accreditation. But let's get off of that. I do want to ask you about foreign relations, because I know this sounds trite, but the world is getting smaller. We have this situation with Pakistan. I can just say this. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to figure that out. We have a nation of Pakistan right now that seems to despise us. We give them well over $1 billion, maybe a couple of $1 billion a year, and they have nuclear weapons that we would just as soon not see fall into the hands of Islamic terrorists. You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Right. If you're president, that's a tricky situation. Congressman, how do you handle that?
Well, I think the way we've handled the Soviets is a pretty good example. You know, they had a ton of them, and a lot of those floated around. I'm not sure they can identify every single one of them right now, but they had to deal with that, and that was a very dangerous situation. When I was a flight surgeon, that was in the 60s, and it was quite dangerous. As a matter of fact, I was drafted while the nuclear weapons were put in Cuba. So Kennedy, I thought, set a pretty good example. He had to deal with it, but he and Khrushchev got on the phone, and they both agreed to withdraw weapons. We actually backed off from putting our weapons on their borders in Turkey, and they took them out of Cuba. I think it should be dealt more in that manner rather than saying, well, we have to invade them and take them over. I think that's when we get into trouble, because I think the Pakistan, I use that as an example of the chaotic foreign policy that we have, because at one time we're dropping bombs on people there that we think are the bad people, and a lot of innocent people die, and they get very angry at us. And then we send money to the government, and then the people get mad at their government, they get mad at us. It's so chaotic. I mean, we have to make up our minds one way or the other.
Now, Your campaign, I've watched your campaigns several times. Even as a libertarian candidate for president, you ran, what was it, 90, when was it?
88.
88. But this time, more than any previous time, you are gaining traction with the American people. Is it because of the number of debates that you have participated in? Or is it because Ron Paul now has a message that is ringing even more true with the people of this country?
I think it's the second. I don't give myself a whole lot of credit for giving any grand speeches, but I think it's a grand message. And the message is great, but the disaster is staring us in the face. Financially, I first ran for Congress in the 70s over the financial issues and the gold standard and why I predicted and thought that government wouldn't be totally out of control if there's no restraints on printing money. So this has all come about, and we are facing our bankruptcy, although too many in Washington won't admit it. So that financial crisis there. But even on this issue that you say that you and I probably have some disagreements, people are sort of tired of, Afghanistan, 10 years. This is why I argue the case, for the Constitution. If you have to go to war, you declare them, you win them, and get them over with. So I think the frustration with the war, the deficit we're facing, the financial crisis, and I think the fact that I've offered in a very serious manner to cut the budget $1 trillion. If it's a problem, that's what you have to do. But the other candidates haven't offered any real cuts. Nobody in Washington is talking about real cuts. They're talking about cutting proposed increases,
right.
And that's quite different from what I've been talking about.
That message is totally lost on the American people. That all they're talking about is, we'll slow down our spending increases a little bit. And I think if the American people understood that, there would be a lot more haywire thrown into the presidential election than there is right now.
But don't you think the major media have a lot to do with this, because they never pointed out when they talk about a cut, whether it's an entitlement or an overseas expenditure, they always talk about it as a real cut. They never explain this, so that's why it's so difficult for us to get that message out.
Well,
American people know there's something seriously wrong, though.
Well, I think the major media, the Obama media in this country, is absolutely dedicated to the proposition of reelecting Barack Obama as president of the United States. They put him there. They're embarrassed by him, but they want to make sure he stays.
I think you're right about that.
So now, the financial situation in Europe. We talk about Pakistan. That's military. That's national. That is a physical threat. The euro may be caving in right now. Some people are suggesting, it's just a matter of time before the United States steps in there to bail those people out. If Ron Paul is the president, certainly we don't want to see a catastrophic economic disaster in Europe, but what do we do?
Well, you have to face the reality, and the reality is countries like Greece are bankrupt, and they should go bankrupt. They should liquidate that debt and clear the board. But to keep propping them up, but we can't blame the Europeans for doing it, because we do the same thing over here. Look at our TARP funds, as well as allowing our Fed to create $15 trillion, and they've already been very much involved in Europe. And Bernanke has already just recently announced he would be available if it becomes necessary for us to even inject more funds. But I think the whole system is doomed, whether it's the euro, the European Union, as well as our dollar. It's just a matter of time. We could work our way out of it. The odds are slim. That is, we'd have to cut $1 trillion and quit printing money, and we'd have to back off on our spending.
What happens if we don't?
I think it's going to be catastrophic. I think it's going to be a destruction of the currency. We have the biggest bubble existing ever in the history of the world. And all the currencies are connected. We do have a type of negative globalism. It's globalism, but it's all fake. It's built on debt. And that will come apart, and people will leave currencies. They're leaving other currencies, and the euro is under threat. But eventually they're going to leave the whole dollar standard. The dollar is the reserve standard, and most people who are serious about this, whether they want the UN to establish a new currency or whether it's some of us who would like to see a gold standard, I think many people are very much aware that the dollar standard is destined to end. It's just a matter of time and how chaotic it's going to be and what it's going to be replaced by.
I'm talking about destiny. Maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I came upon a video of a somewhat younger, by maybe 9 years, Ron Paul on the floor of the House of Representatives warning that if we didn't do something about Fannie and Mae, we were headed to a real estate meltdown in the United States. So you and Gene Dixon, how did you figure that one out?
Well, I think I cheated by following Austrian economics and following and reading and studying a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am who explained the business cycle, and that was the motivation, of course, for me to get involved in the 70s because this was expected to happen. And the meltdown, of course, sort of has come, but it hasn't allowed to go its full course. It's just being delayed. So the fact that they were able to patch it together in 08 and 09 by the creation of all this credit, they never have allowed the total meltdown or the correction that is necessary. So this is going to be prolongation. If they'd have allowed it to really liquidate that debt in 08 and 09, it had been over with and we'd be back to growth again. But we're doing like what Japan has done, and they've been in the doldrums for 20 years. We did it in the Depression. We wouldn't allow the corrections to occur, and we're doing the same thing. So you can't correct the problem of too much spending and debt and inflation by spending more, printing more, and regulating more and taxing more. It just won't work. It baffles me that people don't understand this because it isn't that complex.
Now, a colleague of yours for many years, Barney Frank, is not running for re-election. What's his legacy in regards to our real estate meltdown?
Well, I think eventually his policy on housing, it was in combination with the Federal Reserve responsible for the housing bubble. The Fed had to be there to create easy credit, easy money, and free money, but it had to also be in combination with government programs that mandated affirmative action to make banks give loans to people who couldn't afford them and shouldn't have had these loans. So it was a combination of two, and I think the history will show what the contribution of both.
Two more quick questions. Number one, something about Ron Paul, a big misconception or something the voters out there don't know?
Well, I think all of us suffer, whether we call ourselves libertarians or conservatives, we suffer from the fact that they claim we're uncaring. And I think people who know me know that's not true because I happen to believe that if you do care about people and you care about prosperity and you want people to be employed, you have to believe in the marketplace. So it's a very, very strong motivation on my part to be a humanitarian in the sense of helping people, but you can't do that with authoritarianism. You have to do it with more freedom. Now,
are you going to be in New Hampshire?
I will be there either late tonight or tomorrow. I'll be there tomorrow for sure.
I mean during primary time. At the New Hampshire primary on January the 10th.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
I will be sitting once again at that little table with cute Belinda sitting there, and once again we're going to ask you to sit down and talk with us, and this time you'll do it, won't you?
You mean I have refused in the past?
The last time you turned around and walked away.
Oh, I don't recall that.
Yeah, you told Belinda.
I don't know what was on my mind. Yeah.
Well, maybe I just wasn't attractive. You just told Belinda, I don't want to talk to him, and you turned around and walked away.
Well,
you know what it was?
That doesn't sound like me, but
you know what it was? It was that Texas A&M ring I was wearing.
Oh my! Well, I'll have to No, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not much into that. But I do have a son and a daughter. One went to Texas, one went to A&M, so I know about the little challenges there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you before then, but we'll look forward to actually howdying and shaking hands in New Hampshire.
Thank you for having me on, Neal.
Okay. Congressman Ron Paul, presidential candidate, GOP, will be back.